Hello, and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss, Dragon of the Southern Tier. I'm happy to be here with you today on the most interesting of news. It's quite a story that we're going to be going over, and actually, not a story, but the news as being reported. It's about John Kerry, it's about Iran, it's about the national security of the United States and the rest of the world. But before we get started with that story, let's first mention that if this is the first time that you're seeing the channel, welcome. We're glad to see you here. And we do long-form political commentary. Also, every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we do a live stream on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, DLive, all the social media that the internet overlords allow, to be able to speak with you and to share in the expression of the First Amendment on the issues that matter to you. From anywhere in the world, we ask you to join us and to leave your chat, your tweet, your text, or to even call into the program and to voice your opinion and express your First Amendment rights. We look forward to seeing you every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Now to the issue of the day. Wow. We've heard about stories, slow news days, stories being buried. But at the moment, there is an outrage going on in America, in American politics. Now, let's set aside left and right. Let's set aside Democrat and Republican. Let's look at a very serious issue. We're talking about the national security of the United States and also global terrorism around the world, affecting nations like Great Britain, France, Germany, Israel. We're talking about a big deal. Because what we're talking about, very simply, is whether or not John Kerry has aided and abetted the largest sponsor, the single greatest sponsor of global terror in the world. That's Iran. So let's find out. Now, to make sure that we understand this, we remember and we want to look back at, it was 2016, July 2016, when we were covering the Iran nuclear deal, a deal that was touted by the Obama administration, including then Vice President Joe Biden, who were touting this as a means to create more global peace, that this would end the nuclear threat of Iran for the rest of the world. And in exchange of a promise not to develop nuclear missiles, the United States gave Iran $115 billion in funds that had previously been frozen. This was highly suspect. In fact, as we were talking about it in our article on July 14, 2016, it was quoted. Then Secretary John Kerry said on January 21st, 2016, in an interview with CNBC, "I think that some of the money that has been given to Iran will end up in the hands of the IRCG or other entities, some of which are labeled terrorists." By the way, the IRCG is Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps, which is known to be the leading promoter of global terror in the world. John Kerry admitted in 2016 that he and the Obama administration actively funded global terror in the world to the amount of $150 billion. That is a dangerous and deadly and significant admission. Something that the media, the major news media at the time, ignored and glossed over and excused as being something that was not as important as the world peace caused by the Iran nuclear deal. Now, one of the omissions in the Iran nuclear deal was that Iran was still able to make ballistic missiles, intercontinental missiles, ICBMs, the very thing they need to deliver a nuclear missile to the United States, a nation that they state and have continued to state is the devil in their words and the evil of the world that they seek to have destroyed. It's not partisan. They want to kill Americans, period. Republicans, socialists, Democrats, everybody in between. Iran has made no difference in that. They want everyone gone that does not believe exactly what they believe. And they have gone through great efforts over the decades to make sure that they can put that terror in every nation in the world. Now, this is important to understand the Iranian nuclear deal so that we can understand what has happened since. We know that Joe Biden has sought to reignite the Iran nuclear deal. President Trump had killed that deal because he believed Iran was continuing to move forward on getting intercontinental ballistic missiles and also working at the same time secretly to create nuclear material, in effect creating nuclear weapons and having $150 billion plus sanctions removed by the Obama administration. Then Vice President Joe Biden and the Biden administration do not agree with that assessment, and they have sought to reignite the Iran nuclear deal, which the terms of which Iran has demanded all sanctions to be lifted to allow them to once again have free rein on increasing the amount of global terror in the world. To that end, John Kerry is one of the forward-speaking individuals for the Biden administration. He has been in constant touch with Iran and trying to promote the Iran nuclear deal. With that being said, we understand the ground in which we are looking at, and that is that the GOP is now tearing into John Kerry because there is an Iran controversy. More than just a controversy, there are claims of treason that has been done. And I want to be very clear. Senator Dan Sullivan of Alaska has said, people are talking about treason, and I don't throw that word around a lot. Why would anyone claim that John Kerry, a former Secretary of State of the United States, a former member of Congress, why would they claim that he is a treasonous individual, that he has betrayed the national trust and security of the United States, and by that, also the rest of the world? Well, it's been revealed by the New York Times on Sunday that the Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif said that John Kerry told him that Israel attacked Iranian assets in Syria, quote, at least 200 times, end quote. Zarif added that he was surprised that John Kerry would reveal that sensitive information to him, according to audio that the New York Times had in its possession. Let me pause to say, this is insane. This is critical. This is, if it is correct, treason. Outright, absolute treason. Let me further say that based on research and looking at the details and the reporting in the news, we believe it may be true. And the reason for that, we're going to explain. Now, you may say that you have some doubts before we get started. You may say that even though the New York Times is reporting this, they may be wrong. And you would say that because, as many of us may recall, there was the Russian bounties. If we heard, it was in the summer of 2020 that the New York Times and other newspapers reported that there was evidence, intelligence, that said that the Russians were putting out bounties for U.S. soldiers in Afghanistan. But we have found many months later, and well after the election that these organizations were supporting for Biden, we found out that that's not entirely true. In fact, it may not be true at all. And in fact, if we look at The Guardian, they reveal that U.S. intelligence agencies only have low to moderate confidence in reports last year that Russian spies were offering Taliban militants in Afghanistan bounties for U.S. soldiers. They go on to say that U.S. intelligence had low to moderate confidence in the reporting based on bounties because it's based on, in part, on detainee reporting and because of the difficult operating environment in Afghanistan. But here's the big thing. There is an assessment that the Russian intelligence officers did seek to encourage Taliban attacks against the United States and coalition personnel. Key words here, and we've gone over this before. Seek to encourage. Not that they did it, not that this was a fact, not that this was occurring, not that U.S. soldiers were endangered by bounties from Russia and Vladimir Putin. No, that they sought, that this was an idea, that this was something encouraged, and even that is something that U.S. intelligence believes low to moderate in confidence, which means they don't think it's real. They don't think it's true. It didn't happen. And you may say, well, if the New York Times and the rest of the news media got this wrong, then didn't they get everything wrong? Aren't they not credible? Well, according to the left, and according to the majority of America and the world, the New York Times is still the premier news reporting agency in the United States. That the majority, the overwhelming majority of their stories are true, even though under the Trump administration, there was a lot of speculation, a lot of unnamed sources that they were quoting, and we have seen over and over again, like with the Hunter Biden laptop, like with what we're seeing here with the U.S. bounties, over and over again, the New York Times has gotten it wrong. So why do I say that I believe in this case, the New York Times may have it correct, that John Kerry may have committed treason against the United States? Well, let's take a look. This is the article from the New York Times. It was released on Sunday, a very low news day. Not many people are paying that much attention to international news. In fact, most Americans don't pay attention to international policy at all. But for those that do, Sunday is not necessarily the day that they tend to look at. But it was on April 25th when this article, Iran's foreign minister in leaked tape, says Revolutionary Guard set policies that the government of Iran is actually controlled by the same GC, that is in charge of global terror around the world. Now, this is an important article, and I want to be very clear. You have to go through 21 paragraphs. Let me say it again, 21 paragraphs to find the one paragraph that the New York Times notes and actually refers to John Kerry. And that is this paragraph right here, which says, former Secretary of State John Kerry informed Mr. Zarif that Israel had attacked Iranian interests in Syria at least 200 times. To his astonishment, Mr. Zarif said. This is the Prime Minister of Iran. This is an individual who is he's the equivalent of a president in the United States. Although the Ayatollah runs Iran, and according to Mr. Zarif, the militant wing of that nation is the one that actually controls all of the international policy and all of the actions of that nation. Even so, this paragraph that you see before you from the New York Times that was buried in the information is very odd. And that makes you think that it may be true. Let me read you the paragraph prior to it. On the night that Iran decided to retaliate against the United States for the killing of General Soleimani, two Quds Force commanders went to see the Iraqi Prime Minister Abdel Mahdi to inform him about that in about 45 minutes, Iran would be firing missiles at a military base where U.S. troops were stationed, Mr. Zarif said. The Americans knew about the strike before he did. So they go from talking about a retaliation against the United States for killing the international terrorist Soleimani, and then he goes and says former Secretary of State John Kerry informed him that Israel had attacked Iranian interests in Syria at least 200 times, to his astonishment. He then goes on in the article, they then go on to say, Mr. Zarif also pointed to the cover-up of the guards' downing of a Ukrainian jetliner in Iran that killed 176 people on board on the morning after Iran attacked the airbase. Wait a minute. What does John Kerry have to do with this? Where does that come from? How does that flow? We're talking about General Soleimani and his death. We're talking about the response to the United States taking out an international terrorist. We're talking about the reaction of Iran's Revolutionary Guard, the terrorist wing of the Iranian government, and how they attacked innocent civilians on a jetliner, killing 176 people immediately after the attack. What does this paragraph about John Kerry have to do with any of that? It has nothing to do with it. And that means that the New York Times and their editorial staff, not just the writer, not just the reporter, not just the information, the editorial staff, the New York Times, sought to bury this information. They did not want anyone to notice it. They wanted the American people to glass right past it. They threw in some critical information that had nothing to do with what was being said and said, oh, and we know John Kerry gave away a U.S. ally. They committed treason against the United States. They endangered the security of a sovereign nation, an ally of the United States, and therefore put the United States in jeopardy if that ally were to find out and to react to it. John Kerry hurt America. You may say, well, it was indirect. So is a missile. That doesn't mean it's not deadly, that it doesn't have consequences. That doesn't mean that it doesn't have consequences. And how is that affecting the relationship between Israel and the United States right now? And how that relationship is affected changes the way that the Middle East moves forward. It is a difference between peace in the Middle East, as in the 4 peace deals created under President Trump, versus the buildup of troops in Syria, the bombing of troops in Syria, and the timetable, the exact date and time that the U.S. troops will be leaving out of the Middle East under the Biden administration. These things matter. And this matters. And I have a strong belief that the New York Times, because they buried this on the 21st paragraph, in between paragraphs that have nothing to do with the information that is conveyed, knew that this was true, that there is a credible source, and that they wanted to hide this from as much of the American public as possible to delay this coming out to the American people for as long as possible. Of course, the American media has noticed it, not just the Republican Party, but the American news media. And they mentioned that this is a troubling bit of information because not only did Zarif mention that the United States, that John Kerry had committed effectively treason, but also that all of the promises of the Obama administration, the very cornerstones and foundation of the Iran nuclear deal that allowed it to be passed in the United States and to give the American people a false sense of security, none of it was true. Because in the United States, President Obama promised, Vice President Biden promised that This was being supported by the moderates in Iran, and they had power. And in fact, quote, the real moderates in Iran were forsaken by the Obama and Biden when they decided that the United States wouldn't support the 2009 Green Movement in what the Soviet dissident Natan Sharansky called one of the biggest failures of human rights in the modern history. Democrats Murphy, Biden, and Kerry are more interested in ensuring Iran becomes a regional counterforce to Israeli power. This is being quoted by the National Review. And you may disagree with that. You may say that the National Review has a somewhat biased view, but it is a fact that in 2009, the Obama administration, even though there was an Arab Spring ongoing, ignored Iran, ignored the Green Movement, the moderates, asking for democracy and the support of the United States. They let them be slaughtered by the Iranian government. And it is that same Obama and Biden administration that then gave $150 billion to the Iraqi the Revolutionary Guard, which increased the net global terror in the world. Yes, it is a human rights mockery from the Obama administration with the help of Vice President Biden and then Secretary John Kerry. So the public has noticed what has happened. Let's go forward. How has the White House reacted? When the news media noticed this, when the news media decided that they needed to tell the public about this significant issue, this issue that is going to and has already affected not only our allies, but also the American people in endangering our safety, our national security, how did the Biden administration respond? Well, let's hear it.
Thank you.
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you, ma'am. I have one question about foreign policy and then another about COVID here. So the first one is, in tapes obtained by the New York Times, Iran's foreign minister says that former Secretary of State John Kerry informed him that Israel attacked Iranian interests at least 200 times. As the Secretary has shifted roles, he still continues to represent the United States on a world stage. Does the President have any comment or reaction to Kerry telling the Iranians about covert military action on the part of Israel?
We're not going to comment on leaked tapes.
Okay.
That's it. We're done. That's all the Biden administration had to say. We're not going to talk about it. You don't get to know about this. The American people don't get an answer on this. It is perfectly okay for former Secretary of State John Kerry, who is working directly with the Biden administration, who is a significant member of the Biden cabinet and administration. It is perfectly okay for him to continue to talk to United States allies, even though he is under investigation or should be under investigation for treason, for aiding and abetting an enemy of the United States and a group of individuals, the terrorist state of the world, individuals known and notarized and infamous for creating global terror. And it's okay, because the American people shouldn't think about this. You shouldn't have to talk about this. They're not going to discuss this. This is from the same New York Times that the Biden administration used to their advantage to be able to go and get the election. They used the news story that there were U.S. troops, that there was a bounty on U.S. troops. The Biden administration spoke a lot about that during the election. The Biden administration talked a lot about all of the stories that were questionable about President Trump, stories that continuously turned up to be not true. The Biden administration was quick to say there was no news about Hunter Biden. And we have seen several, not just a laptop, but also his lying about a gun permit. And that's a story that's not supposed to be questioned either. Seriously, we should have some serious questions about this. This is a problem. And the Biden administration is saying, don't worry, don't talk about it. It's not important. I beg to differ. This is important. And it makes us believe that there is more credibility to this story. And we have to ask the question, what else was said by John Kerry to Iran? What other secrets did he reveal to Iran to enable the Iran nuclear deal and to try and enable the Iran nuclear deal resurgence 2.0 under the Biden administration? And you should be asking that question as well. In the meantime, we have to look forward to what can we do about Iran right now? And I will tell you that one of the things that we can do is the Maximum Pressure Act, which places new sanctions on the Iranian regime that removes the ability to, continues to have sanctions until a better deal is made and increases the congressional oversight. This is something that Representative Claudia Tenney is one of the co-sponsors on, and she is a friend of this channel. We have known her many years. And we believe that the bill number, so that you can look this up for yourself, is H.R. 2718, listed in the long title as to impose additional sanctions with respect to Iran and modify other existing sanctions with respect to Iran and for other purposes. That is the long title. The bill, again, the number is H.R. 2718. What that contains, as submitted by Representative Jim Banks, this is a short study of it. All links are included in the description so that you can see this for yourself. The Maximum Pressure Act is one of the toughest sanction bills on Iran ever proposed by Congress and codifies into law the Trump administration's successful maximum pressure campaign on Iran. Okay, some of the things that this bill will do, if you go through, is in Section 106, that this bill will hold Iran accountable for the human rights abuses against the peoples of Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, and Venezuela. And this is something that I know Democrats are very, very interested in. Human rights abuse, we hear that from the Democratic Socialists on a constant basis. This is one of their key concerns. Then they should be able to support this bill. In Section 107, we say that the bill also includes, and I just want to check my notes here. And of course, I can't find my note on this. This is the section in which the sanctions will not be lifted on Iran unless a vote from Congress approves of this, denying any kind of deal making and any kind of backdoor deals that the Biden administration may use, much like they used backdoor deals to get the initial Iran nuclear deal passed under then Secretary Kerry. In addition, there is also Section 113. Now, this section deals with I left out. I remember now. Section 107 also is based, and this bill is based on a bill which happens to be H.R. 3364, Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act, a bill that was passed, and this is a actual bipartisan bill passed in 2017 by 190 Democrats, 229 Republicans. This is to make sure that the American people were safe versus Russia. And using that same language, this bill is now going to be able to protect America from Iran as well. Going on to Section 113, this bill is going to make sure that Iran, in looking at the oversight, the failure of John Kerry and the Obama administration, along with Vice President Biden, they failed to stop Iran from making ballistic missiles, intercontinental missiles that would reach the United States. which if Iran has a nuclear weapon, it is useless unless they can get it to the shores of other countries. Ballistic missiles allow them to do that. The Obama-Iran nuclear deal allows them to make those missiles, to deliver those bombs and or other bombs and or chemical weapons, which are not included in the Iran nuclear deal. This is a problem for the world global terror leader to have ballistic missiles, something that the Obama administration, that Vice President Joe Biden, that then Secretary John Kerry didn't care about. And this is being corrected now under Bill H.R. 2718, supported by 89 members of Congress, including Congresswoman Claudia Tenney. So we have to ask you a question. We know that there are members of Congress that are looking to protect the American people. We know the bill that is there to protect the American people. We know that the Biden administration in the past did not care, under the Obama administration, did not care to try and protect the world from the global leader of terror getting ballistic missiles that would allow them to transmit chemical weapons and or other bombs to other parts of the world. They empowered the global leader of terror in the world with $150 billion. And they are seeking to again enrich and benefit Iran over the American people, in our opinion. It is also our opinion that John Kerry has harmed the United States by betraying our allies and therefore the United States and committing an act of treason, which, if nothing else, must be investigated and must be resolved. 1,000% must be verified as absolutely true or absolutely false. There is no middle ground. There is no distraction on this. Perhaps you think that I am overly excited, that my passion has exceeded my comprehension, that I have missed something in the news articles that I have presented to you from the New York Times, who broke the news story themselves. Perhaps you think I have misunderstood the words of the Biden administration. Perhaps you think this is partisan when I am talking about nonpartisan national security of the United States, of Israel, of the United Kingdom, of France and Germany, and all of our allies around the world. And if you believe that I have missed something, that I have misunderstood something, if I have overreacted about this potential treasonous threat to the United States, please, I want to see your comment. Let us know what you think. Not only in the comments here, like them, share them if you have found this to be interesting, to be informative, but also please subscribe so that more people can join into this expression of free speech, our First Amendment right that can reach everyone in the world. Let's hear everyone's comments about whether or not they believe this is a threat to national security for the United States and a threat to the rest of the world by enabling global terror. And I look forward to seeing you every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to add your voice to the conversation. I thank you, and I hope you'll be well.